Hi everyone, this is Adriana,
And this is Tanya.
and you're listening to Closing the Gap, a social justice podcast that focuses on providing solutions to ensure that we're all able to collectively work towards social healing and to combat all of the injustices that we fight in our everyday lives. We really strive here to form a community. We know that the fight towards social justice is one that is meant to be fought collectively.
And it's also one that's meant to be fought long term. We know we are on the shoulders of giants. We know that this has been a struggle for a long, long time, for generations, for decades, centuries, even. And with that said, these times do feel a little bit harder than others for many people, especially in the US, just because of our current administration, policies being rolled back that people worked really hard for. And so while we know it's a long curve, we do feel like right now we need some inspiration. And we are bringing inspiration your way thanks to the great Fatimata Chan that's speaking with us today, and that we're excited to just share her story with you.
Here's a quick break before our conversation with Fatimata Chan.
What if tackling climate change starts with rethinking who holds power? I'm Candace Lewis-Wilson, Senior Program Director at Center for Public Impact.
And I'm Gabrielle Barron, Senior Program Manager in the Climate Action Team at the Centre for Public Impact. We're the new hosts of Reimagining Government. In Season 4, we're exploring what happens when those too often excluded from decision-making lead the way.
Across 6 episodes, we'll spotlight leaders who are transforming how we respond to the climate crisis.
They're redesigning cities, challenging climate colonialism, defending the Amazon, mobilizing global activism, and bringing youth voices into politics and policy. At its heart, this season isn't about carbon emissions.
It's about power, who has it, how it's shared, and how reimagining leadership from the ground up can reshape the future of government for everyone. Subscribe and listen now, wherever you get your podcasts.
If you don't know her already, first question, how do you not know her? But second, if you don't know her already, she is a poet, author, speaker, climate activist, and scholar. So she hits just so many different facets, backgrounds, approaches that all come together in the name of social justice in such a beautiful, interconnected way. And that's why we felt like it would be such a great episode to have during these times, because she's just going to show you how you can get involved no matter what your interests are, even if you have interests that overlap. So thank you, Fatimata, for just joining us today.
Of course, I'm super excited to obviously be in community with both of you and to share this space and talk more about like the world's climate, everything going on.
I think to really kick things off, we'd like to hear more about your journey and how you started. What really inspired you to begin your social justice journey? And what would you say to our listeners who are looking to also start in their own journeys?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in the South Bronx, New York. I think growing up for me, I just saw like so many things. When I was in the second grade, I remember my teacher had given us an assignment to write a letter to an elected official. As you all know, I'm pretty sure you've done it in your classes before. I wrote my letter to the mayor at the time about like environmental protection and how there's a lack of budget when it comes to sanitary in the South Bronx because it's one of the least funded districts, at least the district I was in New York. So I was like, we need to do something to fix this. And then his response was so generic per usual. He was like, we're implementing programs and initiatives to help like fund and support K-12 education. And I wasn't satisfied with that response, obviously. So I was like, well, I need to do more work around this. So I started like researching different nonprofit organizations and like figuring out ways that I can like volunteer in my local community, whether that was doing like park cleanups or like volunteering after school to tutor kids related to like climate work. So I was just like, how can I like be more involved? And then related to my own personal experience, both of my parents immigrated here from Senegal and the Gambia respectively. And so with that immigrant experience, I like started noticing like low income, okay, lack of environmental protection, gender inequity, lack of access to immigration support. I was just like, oh my God, these are so many issues that are like piling on. I'm like, need to do something about it. And so it really didn't kick into gear until high school when I joined this organization called Girl Up. I became a teen advisor for them at the UN Foundation. And we did like a lot of policy work, lobbied on Capitol Hill for legislation related to like the Girls Count Act, which was like helping to get girls registered at birth. And I knew that issue very well because my parents obviously immigrating from a country that deals with a lot of issues related to early childhood marriage, lack of access to education for girls. And I was like, here's the work, like we're doing it. So I would go to my rep, he knew me very well, and I would talk to him about my personal story. And like literally, I remember one time we went and I literally cried in his office and I was like, this is a very important matter. Like we need to work on this issue. And he ended up signing on to the bill, which was super cool. And I think it did end up getting signed into law in 2015. Obviously, with everything going on, there's a lot of like overturns and like things happening at the moment. So we'll see how long a lot of this policy stands to stand the test of time. And then college, very similar work, except I started getting more involved in like mutual aid efforts because I started to realize after spending so much of my high school years lobbying on Capitol Hill that it really, the work lies within community, honestly. And I found that the most impactful work comes when you're actually working with the people that have been impacted by these issues on the ground. And so being on a college campus, we were impacting this local community called Easton. And I was like, wow, we're like up on this hill. We're not really interacting with the local community that's there. Like, how can we get more involved? So we founded this coalition called Dear Lafayette, which was kind of like a letter to our college institution. We came up with a list of demands and we're like, hey, like we're impacting the local community. Like, what are we doing about it? Hey, like Black students, Indigenous students on campus, international students on campus, what are we doing to support them? So we raised like $20,000 toward BLM orgs, different types of orgs, and we did that all in 2 weeks. We also had several meetings with the president of our college to kind of like push these notions forward. And we founded like a food pantry on campus to give international students access to food. That's when I also went back to my climate interest and, founded Climate for Sisterhood during that time as well. And I don't know, I think my journey has been like all over the place, but I found that the biggest thing is like, regardless of what location, community I'm in, I've always found ways to support that community because I feel like if I'm going to be in this space for 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, like I need to make sure that I'm leaving a positive impact and also working with the community that I'm impacting. So I think that would be my biggest advice for people who are trying to go on this collective journey is that, you could have your interests, whether that be climate, gender, whatever, they're all interconnected and everyone plays like a different role in it. Like you don't have to solve every single issue. And I know in my little spiel about my journey, you like see so many different issues come up. That's great. Like don't be like me though, because you're gonna like get burnt out, honestly. So I would say like you could play a small part, whether that's like volunteering, doing policy, writing, anything, like literally anything anyone can contribute. It could literally be like your workplace, like your job, like how is your job impacting your local community and figuring out ways how your job can be more inclusive towards that community, how your job can be positively impacting the communities that like it's working with.
There's so many gems in there. I don't like, there's so many that I wanna pick out, but
Yeah.
starting off with the whole point of you can play your part no matter how big or small, or how you would consider it, because at the end of the day, that's why collective action is so impactful. It's because it comes together, and that's when real change is able to be made. We're
Yeah.
all human beings. We can
Yeah.
only do so much, but when it all comes together, that's why even, like, boycotting works so well because it's all of our voices coming together to speak up against something. So I love that you're stressing that point out. I also love that you're bringing up all of the work that you did specifically in New York. Tanya and I actually lived there for a bit. I think she was there for a year. I was there for about 2.5. I really can say the community there in New York, it just, in a way, kind of radicalized me. There's a lot of
Yeah.
organizations that are in New York that are willing to fight for so many different causes. I know the ones I was involved with included like the People's Forum or
Mm.
the Palestinian Youth Movement in New York. It's just good to know that there's so many areas that you can apply your action towards. And yes, even if you want to focus, because I totally feel you. I've definitely have felt burnt out myself with certain things. But like to your point, everything is intersectional. And if we attack at least one part of the problem, you're feeding into attacking the whole issue.
For sure.
Honestly, just well said to both of you. I feel like I don't have anything to add. It's just honestly, we could stop the podcast right here. Like we are just all in awe of what you do, and like you said, how you bring it all together, how these issues are interconnected, and you shine a light on that. The benefit of doing that also is, let's just say you're in a climate space, like a lot of environmentalists are around you because they're working on a certain thing. You can bring something about gender equality in that space that maybe they didn't think about, and they were so focused on one solution that maybe didn't actually, maybe wouldn't have worked the way they wanted it because they weren't thinking about the other consequences that might happen because of that. So that approach of having multiple issues in your mind at maybe all times is actually beneficial for every space that you're in. That's the way I see it as well. So yes, beautiful. I think the only thing you didn't touch on that I really love is your poetry, how the art also shines in your activist spaces as well. On a personal note, I wonder if it's also a way that you can kind of vent or release some of that burnt outness. And I think that's because I'm a writer myself, and that's how I get my thoughts out of my head. Once it's on paper, I just feel so much better. And so, yeah, I guess my question is, what does poetry do for you? How do you see it also play into all of those amazing things that you're doing?
Yeah, when that's a really good point. Like, I don't know, me too. Like, honestly, like once it's on the paper, it's like, okay, it's like outside of my mind. I'm like, okay, I can like breathe. But like on the poetry piece, I don't know, writing has like similar to you, like played a huge role in my life, especially because English, believe it or not, is not my first language. And when I was in school, I think I was just having a really hard time expressing myself at times. And so in middle school, like we had this assignment, I think it was April, of course, Poetry Month. We had this assignment. I had to write a poem about mental health and then perform it in front of my class. So I wrote it. I talked about like my experience being an eldest daughter, talking about like being at home and just feeling like very burnt out. And so I performed this poem, and then everyone's reaction was just, oh my God, did you really write that? And I was like, yes, I did. And they're like, oh, you should really get into poetry. And so since then, I was like, oh my God, like poetry is really powerful. Like you can really use your writing to evoke emotions out of people, but also get them to understand like ideas and concepts that they may not have heard of before. And so I was like, okay, let me kind of play with this and see how I can incorporate it into my activism. So it was during the pandemic. I was stuck in my room, nothing to do, couldn't go outside. I was like, okay, let me start talking about social justice. Let me start talking about criminal justice. So I have written a poem called What Do Criminals Look Like? And I had sent it to the Malala Fund as a submission, and they liked it, and they ended up publishing that poem. And in that poem, I talked about like the criminal justice system. I talked about how it's like criminalizing, policing people of color, Black and brown bodies. And I talked about familiar people like Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, like spreading awareness about the people that haven't been victimized by the system that has been set up to disenfranchise different groups of people here in the US. And a lot of people reached out to me. They were like, hey, I didn't know this was an issue. Or, hey, like, how can we do work around this? Like, how can we better support? And so, yeah, I think poetry, writing in general, honestly, is very powerful, but like I've kind of used it as this tool to kind of leverage and speak out. And also in general, like on a more personal level, just express my frustrations, emotions. Because the way the world is now, I feel like we're all like scrolling on our phones, on our feeds, and we're seeing like bad news after bad news after bad news. And you're like, where do I place all this emotion? I don't want to become obviously desensitized to everything that's going on. So how do I like channel it? It's like, okay, let me channel all this towards my writing. At least I can express it that way, because otherwise I might go crazy. With everything that's like going on at the moment.
I also just want to shout out that Fatimata has a poetry book. Is that the best way
Yes.
to describe
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Perfectly
yeah,
imperfect.
yeah,
We will link to all of Fatimata's work in the show
yeah.
notes, so everything we're talking about, people have access to. But yes, that is another beautiful one. So yeah, like we said, y'all, we have an author over here.
Yes, I always be forgetting sometimes, like, oh, yeah, I did do that.
There's just so many things to list off.
Yes.
Even you forget. That's amazing.
Thank you.
To add on to the whole poetry aspect too, I'm not sure if you're familiar. I want to shout out another nonprofit in New York, Brick in Brooklyn. They're
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I like resonate with what you're saying so much because I went to a few of their open mic nights. For those who don't know, Brick is a media space that helps underprivileged communities within, it's near the Barclays Center within Brooklyn. And that community there is
Yes.
so powerful, so welcoming. To your point, we're human beings. We need to be
Yeah.
able to relate to each other.
Yeah.
And some of the poems that you would hear at that open mic, I think one of the most touching ones was talking about gentrification in New York. Just
Mm.
it hit. Everyone in the crowd just felt it. And it's just, I think we need to remember that as we become a little bit, we go into this artificial kind of
Yeah.
technology era that we're falling into,
Yeah.
is that human aspect is still really important, and that
Mhm.
authenticity, it's really what keeps us grounded. It helps us build our community, and I can't stress enough to really explore those outlets as you continue your social justice journey, because it's so easy to get burnt out, to feel like you're alone, especially with so much doom scrolling that can be done
Yeah.
now. But any kind of art form like that, any outlet, it's so powerful. And I think it even kind of falls into your point of speaking about your journey, and the importance of including the voices of those communities that we're trying to serve and help. There's no better way to help those that are need us most unless we have them involved. And there's so many different ways for them to express or share the needs. Like, I think another realization that I've been coming to is that we don't need to look at helping people as like giving out handouts. They're part of
Right.
the conversation where
Right.
we need to humanize each other a little bit more. And the only way that we can do that is to have conversation. So I love that, again, that you're stressing these points, and you're even taking part in that yourself with your poetry. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Art is resistance, art is joy. There's so many beautiful things that come from art. And joy is resistance. Like, it just
Mhm.
again all comes together to that. And even when we are talking about heavy topics, like in open mic nights, what I've realized is maybe it's that release and that community. There's something about doing it in that way through poetry that alleviate some of that heaviness. And I think we need that sometimes. Like, yes, we should all be informed and be reading maybe the news or something more to the fact, but you can have both. It's not like we only need one or the other. And we definitely don't only need things that are not art, because art is what moves people forward. And if people aren't going to, let's say, go to the library and pick up a textbook on a topic, they may read a poem. And so, like you
Right.
said, you are spreading awareness in a very powerful way through
Right.
that.
And I really loved your point about joy's resistance,
Mm.
because in a sense, I feel like they want people to feel unhappy, you know? Part of that is humanizing yourself and realizing like it's not your fault for wanting to exist and like wanting to be positive. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I've seen, I don't remember how it's worded, but basically I've seen on social media people saying the importance of joy's resistance, because
Yeah.
this is on purpose. The doom
Yeah.
scrolling and only
Yeah.
showing bad news on news,
Yeah.
it's not by accident that that's
Yeah.
all we see. It's not a
Yeah.
coincidence. It's by design.
Yeah.
Because if all you're doing is looking at that, then you're not going to want to take action. You're probably just going to
Yeah.
be like, I'm depressed.
Yeah.
I can't handle all of this grief. I'd
Yeah.
rather just disengage and be on my, like, live off the grid, basically. Like, let me just do that, or be in my corner and, be sad all the time. And you can't, it's really hard to act that way, like to take
Yeah.
action that way if you're in that state. So totally agree. It's all, I mean, that's a form of resistance, making sure that you don't fall into that so that you
Mm-hmm.
can make a positive impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only other question I can think of for you is, we've talked about how all your things kind of come together.
Yeah.
And while poetry is great and there is that art side to you and the great work that you do, there is also the academic side. And
Yeah.
so It's kind of interesting to talk about that right after poetry, but I do wonder if they're connected in any way. I mean, you are a scholar, you're a speaker, you are in these spaces a lot. And I do think that change happens there as well. You can also feel free to talk more about policy if you want to, because I know there are rollbacks right now, but I do believe that once it's been implemented, that has made great change. And even if it gets rolled back right now, it can always get re-implemented again because you've set that standard. So yeah, I guess going back to those different sides of your work, how does that come together with the poetry?
Yeah, 100%. I think the research part, or like the academic part, I think I grew up realizing that academia can be very exclusive. And in that exclusion, I learned that like there are people within the research space who don't look like me and who also don't think about communities that are being negatively impacted. So in their research, that within itself is exclusionary. And so I think what has been very beneficial for me is that I've taken a lot of like feminist design classes. I was a gender studies major in college, and I had learned about this concept of kitchen table reflexivity, which basically means like bringing people, essentially it's like a kitchen table. You bring people to the discussion table who've been impacted, or like the people, so you're not doing research on them, they're doing research with you. And so with that concept, I like kind of implemented that into literally everything that I do. Is like these people are also part of the solution, just as much as like whatever problem you're observing, air quotes, in their communities, they also have the ability to help you come up with the solutions to set issues that you're researching. So with the kitchen table reflexivity, I always kept that in the back of my mind with like everything that I was doing, whether it was like policy work, like I went into communities and asked them like, what problems are you seeing? I, for one, obviously can easily do a Google search, and I'm like, what's the poorest district in New York City? What's the poorest district in the Bronx? Like, what are the issues impacting them? But there's a difference between doing that and actually going in and seeing it for yourself. For me, I was like, yeah, academia has a long way to go, and like research has a long way to go in terms of being inclusive of diverse voices. But in learning all of this, I found that it's very important for people like me to be in those spaces so we can continue to deconstruct and have those discussions. And then with policy, I think I've leveraged the personal story aspect a lot, whether when I went to go visit my representatives, when we went as a group, we would always ask the group, like, who's comfortable sharing their story, and how this policy will impact or change their community or their life. And we found that to be like really impactful and important. So it all goes back to like that storytelling piece and like humanizing people and not just seeing them as like subjects. And with theory and like academia, it all just ties back to colonialism. So we just thank these people for that, and what they've brought to the space. But when I see a Black professor, or when I see a woman or someone who identifies as a woman as my professor who can share those experiences with me, I'm like, okay, we can get some real work done here. But yeah.
It's crazy because I feel like that applies to so many different spaces.
Yeah.
But you're right, academia has a long way to go.
Yeah.
Even though it claims that it doesn't, it totally does. And although it might be challenging and it might be tiring, we do need to take up those spaces because that's the only way that we are going to be heard and leave our influence. So it's a
Yeah.
challenge that it's part of the struggle.
The part of the struggle. And like how we diversify like the topics. Like, we could bring new topics to the table that people like aren't thinking of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it becomes less tiring, I think, when, like you said, you see those professors that you identify with, that you feel like you do find some community. It may not be everyone at first,
Yeah. Yeah.
but by sharing, that's why I asked you too, because by sharing
Yeah.
stories like that, then maybe someone listening will be more motivated to, okay, I wasn't thinking of doing this because I didn't feel like I identified in that area, but if Fatimata can do it, then I should try too. Like I can't leave her hanging. So
Yeah.
also having that urge to take up the spaces that we all deserve to take up and really have that representation in there. It can add up. Yeah.
100%. Especially to like challenge, like ask questions, like why are things the way they are? Like, why do we have to do it this way? Is there another way we can do it? And so I always tell people don't be afraid to like ask questions. Don't be afraid to like push the needle to challenge, these spaces because chances are like people are so wrapped up in their own bubbles that they are exclusionary. So in order for it to be inclusive, it's like active. So you have to actually take action. So, and that includes you yourself asking questions, but also challenging as well.
Totally. And it even like goes back to it is for the long haul and it's
Hmm.
worth it, but it's worth it. Even if
Yeah.
it is, it's worth it. I will say I'm feeling pretty inspired. I think this is definitely working. I love all of the positivity that you're bringing. And as we are wrapping up, I did want to ask if there was anything else you wanted to leave our listeners with.
Ooh. It's always hard to like wrap up things, LOL. But
I don't want it to end, honestly.
I think if anyone is listening, I think my biggest thing that I would tell them, like as we wrap up this conversation, is that like everyone has value and everyone can like contribute something to a space, to an issue that you're passionate about. And I don't know, don't underestimate what you can bring to the table, like who you can impact. Your impacts can be like big or small. And let's see, what else can I say? Um, be positive and like be in community with other people. I've like found community to be so healing in a sense. And I found that like I have people that I can go to whenever I'm feeling down or whenever like I see something happening. And so I feel like in this time, like we need to get rid of individualism and individual accomplishments and bring in community because I think that's really what's gonna help us get through this time.
Thank you for listening. We hope you all enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to keep up with us by following us on Instagram or TikTok at Closing the Gap Pod, or feel free to email us with any questions at closingthegappod@gmail.com. Thank you.